Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about food. Not your food, though, not your cozy post-dinner snack or the artisanal sourdough you toasted this morning. No, tonight we descend into the smoky, mud-soaked kitchens of medieval peasants, and you unfortunately are one of them. You might think you've eaten a bad meal before, but I promise your worst microwave disaster has nothing on what's coming. Imagine a life where bread is darker than your future meat is a rumour, and the only seasoning is despair. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and time zone in the comments. I want to know who else is suffering with you tonight. Now then, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin our journey tonight. You're standing ankle deep in muck. Not mud. Muck. It's wetter, smellier, and somehow sentient. You've woken before the sun because the chickens are screaming, your roof is leaking, and your body, despite being only 22, feels like it's 60. You dreamt of warm soup last night. That was optimistic. Soup is for Sundays. Today is just water pretending to be food. The barn is technically also your bedroom and your neighbours. 3 sheep, 1 chicken with a superiority complex, and a mother-in-law who claims her feet used to be clean before you married her daughter. The fire in the hearth has died out. You can smell damp straw, wet wool, and something you really hope is not a dead rat. Time to eat. Your daily bread, brown, coarse and crumbling, is the kind of bread that doesn't so much nourish as it does resent you for eating it. It's made of barley, oats and sorrow. No yeast, no rise, no hope. And you're lucky to have that. On a bad week, you might be forced to eat horse bread, named not because it's made for horses, but because it's made of things only horses would eat. Acorns, beans, things swept off the barn floor. It's edible technically, like parchment is technically chewable. But even this sad slice of edible cardboard is precious, because grain is everything. Grain is currency. Grain is life. Grain is the reason you go to bed hungry, so your kids don't. And when you do have grain, you owe 1/10 of it to the church. Tithes, they call it. God's cut. You drag your harvest into the tithe barn, only for it to be eaten by rats soaked in rat pee and still somehow more appetizing than what's left in your own pantry. You may be wondering why you haven't just said, "To hell with the church." Well, that's the thing. In the 14th century, to hell wasn't just a saying. It was a real flaming, everlasting punishment, waiting for people who skipped their donations, or heaven forbid, fantasized about stealing a rabbit from the Lord's forest. Ah, yes. The Lord. That charming creature who owns the field you farm the forest you're not allowed to hunt in, and the mill that grinds your grain, but charges you half your harvest for the pleasure. You'd love to trap a deer or even a squirrel, but poaching is a capital offence. You get caught with a net and a dream, and suddenly you're the headless main course at someone else's feast. So instead you eat what you can grow, what you can gather, and what you can avoid being executed for. You plant barley in spring, pray it survives, and harvest in the fall. That is if the weather cooperates. If not, say hello to famine. Again. And don't think you own your own time. You don't. Your Lord can summon you to work his land whenever he pleases. You're technically allowed a tiny plot to grow food for yourself, but only after you've broken your back for his wheat hay and firewood. He owns the rights to your labour, your tools, and possibly your soul. Speaking of firewood, don't touch the trees. Forests belong to the king or the local noble. If you're caught gathering so much as a pine cone, it's back-breaking punishment for you. Literally. Best case scenario, you're fined. Worst case scenario, they make an example of you. Let's just say public humiliation doesn't quite capture it. At home, it's not much better. You live in a wooden-framed crook house with one room, no windows, and a dirt floor that soaks up the rain like bread, soaks up broth if you ever had broth. Cooking, sleeping, and breathing all happen in the same cramped space. Your cow and chickens sleep inside too. Why? Because wolves are real, and they will absolutely take your livestock and leave your family one scream closer to starvation. But animals in the house mean fleas, mites, and the kind of smell that lingers even in your dreams. Sanitation, No plumbing, no toilet, no bath. Waste goes in a bucket. Then you toss it in the street. And yes, that same street doubles as a water source when you're desperate. The stream nearby, that's where you dump your waste and fetch your cooking water. At this point, you're basically stewing in your own future illnesses. And yet, you eat. You survive. Just barely. On a diet that wouldn't pass prison standards today. You eat brown bread, onions, leeks, maybe a carrot if you're lucky. You drink ale instead of water because the water could kill you faster. Even the ale is weak and bitter, but it's something. Numbs the hunger. Slightly. You work. You sweat. You pray. You give thanks for the rats that didn't eat your last sack of grain. You give thanks for not dying of fever this week. And when the chicken lays an egg, you feel rich for a day. You don't eat the chicken. Oh no, that's long-term wealth. But the egg, that's a gift. Maybe you'll even boil it. Maybe. But don't get too comfortable. Tomorrow you owe 3 days' labour to the church, and they're not feeding you. Still, you try to sleep. And as you lie there, wedged between straw and livestock, your belly not quite full, you dream of something impossible, a slice of white bread. The kind the nobles eat. You don't even know what it tastes like. But your mouth waters anyway, and tomorrow's hunger is already whispering. You dream of bacon, but not the kind you know today, not crispy, sizzling, paper-thin delight. No, in your world, bacon is a thick grey slab of something that used to be pork, but now mostly tastes like smoke salt and surviving winter. You wake up chewing air, your jaw twitching from phantom flavour. And then your eyes open and you remember that dream cost you. Because bacon, real bacon, is for winter. And winter is still months away. You shouldn't even be thinking about it. That one slab your family preserved after the slaughter season. It's hidden, deep inside a hanging pot over the hearth, salted, smoked, sacred. You've only taken a shaving or two this week. Any more and someone will notice. Someone always notices. Meat in your life is less food and more memory. A mythical reward you might receive if a cow dies of old age or your pig slips and accidentally falls into your knife. Pigs are the poor man's saviour after all. They don't need care. They feed themselves, wander the village streets, and are smart enough to escape foxes. But you don't kill them casually. When you do, every part is sacred. the trotters into jelly, the blood into black pudding, the intestines, sausage casings, the fat cooking gold. Even the bones end up in tools. Nothing is wasted, not in your world. The cow, if your family is lucky enough to have one, is more valuable alive than dead. She gives milk, which is churned into butter or curdled into hard cheese. When she stops producing, only then is she considered meat. Until then, she's basically family. Maybe better than family. She doesn't complain, she doesn't tithe, and her breath smells better than Uncle Hob's. Still, winter changes everything. When snow creeps in and grass withers, animals can't graze. You can't afford to feed them. So you make the awful decision. You slaughter the sheep. You kill the chickens, just the ones too old to lay. And the cow, if she's useless, she joins them. Preservation is everything. You hang meat over the hearth, let it soak in smoke for days, even weeks. Or you salt it layer upon layer of mineral and flesh until it's more salt than meat. It'll keep you alive until spring, though your taste buds might stage a rebellion. The salt burns your tongue, dries your lips, but your stomach doesn't care. Hunger is a better motivator than any spice. And don't even think about seasoning. Herbs are rare and precious. Spices, forget it. That's for the nobility, those bejeweled gluttons who dine on peacocks dressed in their own feathers and hedgehogs cooked in cinnamon. You meanwhile consider onions a treat. What's worse, you can't hunt. Technically, you're surrounded by meat. The forests are alive with deer, boar, and rabbits. But they don't belong to you. They belong to the Lord, or the King, or someone else who doesn't sweat, doesn't toil, and certainly doesn't care if your children are hungry. You step into those woods with a snare or bow, and you're not just stealing, you're risking your neck, literally. Some brave fools do it anyway. Poachers, local legends, half heroes, half idiots. Sometimes they bring back venison and share it in secret. Other times their hands come back in baskets. No one wants to be made an example of, but no one wants to starve either. It's a tightrope between hunger and the gallows. Still, there are options. Rabbits and hares are fair game, barely. You set snares at night, hope the morning brings you something more than disappointment. If you're lucky, the hare didn't chew through the string. If you're really lucky, someone else didn't get there first. Sometimes, though, you spot a bird, a real feathered miracle. You grab a rock, hold your breath, and miss. The bird flies. Your stomach sinks. You curse softly so God won't hear. But there are other ways. Fishing, for instance. Streams and rivers offer eels, mackerel, and herring. You're not a fan of lampreys, no one with a functioning gag reflex is. But they're there. Slimy, parasitic, and somehow considered a delicacy by royals. King Henry? I supposedly died from eating too many. You'd like to believe that's justice, but you're not allowed to celebrate divine irony out loud. If your Lord allows it, you might cast a net. If not, you fish anyway, quietly, carefully, hoping you catch more than disease. And even if you manage to find meat, you don't always get to eat it. Church rules say no meat on Wednesdays, or Fridays, or Saturdays. And definitely not during Lent, a torturous 46-day stretch of holy abstinence that somehow always coincides with the hardest part of the agricultural calendar. You're expected to do fieldwork, tend animals, and survive on bread and vegetables alone. So no meat doesn't come easy. It's a luxury, a gamble, a crime and a miracle, all wrapped into one. It isn't a staple, it's an event. On rare days, though, you score. Maybe the village collectively butchers a cow too sick to survive. Maybe your snare works. Maybe a neighbour trades you a piece of salted ham for 3 eggs and a secret you'll never speak of again. And that night in your one-room house with lice in your straw mattress and the sound of wolves echoing in the woods you cook, over a weak fire in an iron pot inherited from a great someone, you simmer water toss in herbs, a bit of barley, and finally, a chunk of pork. The smell alone is worth the effort. You eat slowly, reverently. You savour each bite knowing it might be weeks before you taste meat again. It's tough, over-salted, slightly burned, but to you it tastes like wealth. You lick your fingers, wipe your mouth, let out a sigh you didn't know you were holding, and for a moment, a very brief moment, you feel full, you feel lucky, but your stomach, like the season, turns quickly, because Lent is coming. You don't remember the last time you truly ate until you were full. That's not something peasants do. Fullness is for weddings, funerals, or theft, mostly theft. But now Lent has arrived, and any comfort, any semblance of nutrition is about to be ripped out of your calloused hands by a decree from above, divine and feudal alike, because God apparently wants you to be hungry. 46 days, no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no indulgence. The logic is simple: suffering purifies the soul. The problem is, your soul is already half purified by suffering year-round. You wonder privately, of course, how much purer you're supposed to get before someone up there finally gives you a decent meal. There's no negotiation. Lent isn't a suggestion. It's law. Church law. And church law trumps any hunger, muscle fatigue, or whimper from your youngest child. The priest reminds you every week, his belly proudly full, his breath laced with fish and forgiveness. He reads from the pulpit about sacrifice, about turning away from temptation, all while the church pantry swells with tithed grain and smoked eels. You meanwhile are expected to till the earth. Repair tools survive the lingering chill of late winter, and feed a family of 6 on nothing but salted fish, hard bread, and boiled vegetables. You're still allowed ale, though. Praise be. And don't imagine you get 3 meals a day. No. On fast days you eat once. 1 meal, usually late after the sun begins to set. And the village bells ring out like a countdown to hope. You might get a small bowl of gruel made with barley water, maybe a piece of cold cabbage stew if it's left from the day before. Bread. Of course. Brown crusty laced with splinters from the grinding stones, and if you're lucky you can rub a garlic clove across the crust for flavour. It's like seasoning but disappointing. Ash Wednesday and Good Friday are even crueler. No food at all. The children cry until they're tired. You lie to them about better days coming. You lie to yourself too. This is when you begin to look at your neighbour's goat with inappropriate interest. Not in that way, but you do think if that goat were to trip and break its neck. You shake the thought away. God is watching. And besides, you don't have the salt left to preserve the meat. But still, temptation bubbles beneath the surface. And with each passing fast day, the smell of someone else's forbidden stew becomes a personal insult. You suspect old Marta is cheating. Her house smells like heaven, or ham, possibly both. To distract yourself, you work harder. Physical labour numbs the stomach. You till soil so hard it mocks you. You sharpen tools that should have been replaced a decade ago. You carry stones just to forget what day it is. You take on extra duties in the hopes that exhaustion will crush hunger. It doesn't. It just makes you hungrier and crankier and eventually strange. You start talking to your bread, apologizing before eating it. You thank your spoon. You sing to your water bucket. These aren't signs of madness. These are the only coping mechanisms left in a world where you can't afford even a hint of joy from food. And yet somehow you endure. Because you always do. You keep a mental calendar in your head, scratching imaginary lines across each cruel day. The 46 feel like 146. But finally the bells ring. Not for fasting, but for Easter. You celebrate not with chocolate or roast lamb, but with boiled eggs and something dangerously close to joy. The first bite of cheese feels criminal. The first cup of milk makes you tear up. You'd hug a chicken if it wouldn't ruin your reputation. And now that Lent is over, you take stock of what's left. The pantry is leaner, the children quieter, your belt a little looser. But your faith has survived another season of imposed starvation. Or maybe it hasn't. Maybe you just got better at hiding doubt behind mumbled prayers. Still, you thank the saints for spring. The soil is warming. Barley planting begins soon. There's a rhythm to peasant life. A brutal grinding rhythm that punishes you for idleness and rewards you with survival, nothing more. But now that meat is technically back on the menu, you glance at your pig with renewed appreciation. He eyes you back, suspicious. He knows the rules have changed. You both pretend nothing is different, but there's a certain tension in the air. He sleeps with one eye open. You sharpen the knife a little more often than usual. The cow seems safe for now. She's giving milk again, and milk means butter. Butter means you can finally spread something on your bread other than tears. Maybe you even churn enough to trade for honey, a miracle so sweet it feels illegal. Eggs return to the table like royalty. Scrambled, boiled, maybe even tucked into a small pie if you really want to show off. The first time your child bites into an egg after Lent, he asks you if it's magic. You almost say yes. Then you nod. Because in your world, anything that fills the belly and brings a smile is indistinguishable from magic. But you don't get comfortable. Because while Lent may be over, your Lord isn't. He wants his due. Church land needs tilling. Taxes need paying. And next season's famine is already planting itself in the wind. Still you carry on. With a belly slightly less empty, with a meal that feels like a memory of heaven. And in the corner of your pantry sits a small wedge of dried cheese, wrapped in cloth, hidden behind a basket of onions. You don't tell anyone it's there. It's your emergency hope. You'd think bread is just bread, but in your world, bread is a caste system baked at 400 degrees. You don't just eat it, you read it. You hold it up to the light, break it in half and see how brown it is, because the darker the bread, the poorer the peasant. And your bread? Your bread is the colour of shame. Dense, heavy, so dark it might as well be classified as coal, and yet it's still your most reliable source of sustenance. It fills you just enough to keep working, but not enough to feel anything approaching joy. There's no yeast, at least not the good kind. Just naturally occurring fermentation that turns your dough into something that tastes like punishment and regret. White bread exists. Oh, it exists. The nobles eat it with every meal. Light, fluffy, fragrant, made from wheat flour that's been sifted so many times it practically glows. It's so refined that it barely even qualifies as food anymore. It's a symbol, really, of money, of power, of not being you. And you chew on rye barley and oats, whatever grains grow in your soggy part of England. When harvests are good, you get enough to bake something that technically resembles a loaf. When they're bad, you stretch the dough with anything that doesn't kill you. Peas, beans, even crushed acorns. It's called horse bread. Yes, really. And yes, you eat it. You tell yourself it's healthy. You lie. There's even a kind of bread made specifically for hard times. It's so bitter, so dense, so aggressively unpleasant it might as well come with a warning label. You bake it thin because it doesn't rise. You bake it flat because it refuses to pretend. You call it trench bread. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it doubles as a plate. Literally. That's right. You eat off your bread. In feasts, you'll never be invited to the nobility eat their lavish meals on slices of stale, 3-day-old brown bread. They call them trenches. They carve out a little crater in the middle, fill it with roasted meat and dripping sauce, and let the juices soak in. And then they toss it to the poor, or the dogs, whichever looks hungrier. You've seen them in the streets, these soggy relics of nobility's excess trenches gnawed on by beggars, shared between children like treasure. You once traded half a turnip for one. It tasted like chicken wine and class resentment. You'd do it again. But baking bread is dangerous business in itself. You need access to a mill to grind your grain. But the mill is owned by your lord. He takes a cut. Of course he does. You could grind it at home with stones and sweat, but the flour comes out, gritty little shards of stone mix in and grind down your teeth over time. Your molars already feel like gravel, so now you smile with half a mouth. Still, bread is what you have. Bread is what you are. Every morning, the same motion mix, knead, bake, pray. You know its smell better than your child's laughter. You recognize the crackle of crust like a family tune. It's the background noise of your life. Sometimes there are variations. On market days, if someone's feeling generous or desperate, you might see wastel bread for sale, a high-quality roll made from the finest flour. It's soft, rich, and priced like a miracle. 3 or 4 loaves for a penny, if you've got a penny to your name. Which you don't. And yet you dream of it. Wastel rolls served warm, slathered in butter, eaten in full view of someone slightly less lucky than you. You imagine that kind of power, that kind of fullness. But for now, your bread is yesterday's bread, and it will be tomorrow's too. You eat it cold mostly. You eat it stale. You dip it in broth when there's broth. When there's not, you chew slower. Pretend it's moist. Pretend it loves you back. And then there's ale, because with bread comes drink. And no, not water. Not if you want to live past 30. Your village water source is also the public waste site, laundry pool, and dead rat graveyard. So you drink ale. Small ale, to be precise. Weak light, barely alcoholic. Safe enough for children. Necessary for everyone. You brew it at home with barley or oats, a few herbs for flavour and hope. It's warm, flat, and a little sour, but it won't kill you. That's the only bar that matters. Sometimes you mix it with hot milk and call it posset. Sometimes you imagine it tastes like cider, like mead, like anything other than barley sadness. But mostly, you just drink it, because it fills the holes bread cannot, because it soothes the burn of salted fish and the sting of envy. And sometimes when the stars are out and the air is just cool enough, you sit outside your one-room house, drink a cup of warm ale, eat your crust of bread, and feel something almost like peace. Almost, because tomorrow you'll have to do it all over again. And that miller, He's sharpening his teeth for your next visit. You didn't think monks had it rough, did you? You imagine robed figures gliding through candlelit halls, chanting in Latin and nibbling grapes while contemplating eternal truths. But step inside a real medieval monastery and you'll find something much humbler and far more edible. Or inedible, depending on your expectations. Because while the monastery is technically holier than thou, its food situation isn't. Monks live by rules. Strict ones. Rules that tell them what to eat, when to eat it, and crucially, what not to enjoy. Pleasure is suspicious. Flavour is risky. Gluttony is damnation with gravy. So meals are functional. Food is fuel. Joy is cancelled. And yet here's the twist, monastic food is still somehow better than yours. For one, they get vegetables. Lots of them. Root vegetables, green herbs, legumes, and all the humble gifts of God's garden. They have cabbages as wide as your face onions, braided and hung like medieval Christmas ornaments, and leeks so long they double as disciplinary tools. These monks might be celibate, but their pottage is scandalously thick. Now they don't eat meat, not officially. The rule of Saint Benedict frowns upon the flesh of four-legged animals. That's reserved for the sick, the infirm, or the abbot's weaker moments. But fish is fine. Fish is practically holy. Salted, pickled, boiled, grilled, stewed fish is the loophole the church decided to look the other way on. You envy it, a little. 'Cause while your diet consists of whatever hasn't gone mouldy yet, monks have gardens, mills, and full-time cooks. They've mastered the art of not enjoying food while still secretly doing just that. They even have cookbooks. Recipes handed down across centuries full of tips on how to make fasting less soul-crushing. One favourite cameline sauce, made from breadcrumbs, vinegar, wine, and spices if you're rich enough to afford the last two. It's poured over everything from fish to hedgehogs. Yes, hedgehogs. Don't ask how they get the quills off. But not all monks live like kings in hoods. Some suffer by choice or design. Take the Cistercians. Famous for simplicity, they eat dried peas and beans so often it becomes a kind of punishment. Lentils are avoided though. Supposedly they cause inflammation, affect your eyesight, and bring nightmares. But peas are penance in a pod. And then there's barley bread. In monasteries, this isn't food, it's correction. Misbehave during evening prayers, barley bread for a week. Disrespect the prior, double barley. Miss Matins entirely. You're practically a cereal monk now. The crust is dry, the texture chalky, and it whispers spiritual failure with every bite. Still compared to your table, the monks dine like minor nobility. Their portions are modest, yes, but steady, reliable. You've gone hungry for 3 days before. They rarely do. But perhaps what fascinates you most is the absence of choice. Monks don't wake up wondering what to eat. They have a rhythm, a discipline. 2 meals a day, one light, one modest, served in silence. No conversation, no chewing loudly, no reaching across the table. Meals are taken like prayers, with solemnity, gratitude, and occasional burps that require confession. You wonder if that kind of structure would help your life. If routine might smother the sting of scarcity, but the monasteries are closed to you. You're not holy enough, or male enough, or celibate enough. And even if you were, someone still has to supply the monks with grain, eggs, milk, and vegetables. That someone is, you guessed it, you. Because monks don't exist outside the system. They are the system. They own land. They rent it out. They collect tithes. Their barns are full because your pantry is not. Their gardens bloom because your back is bent. You pass their stone walls on the way to the fields. Sometimes you hear the bells ringing. Sometimes you smell baked bread wafting over the gate. Once you caught a glimpse of a golden yolk dripping from a monk's mouth during Lent. You didn't report it. You just stared and felt both hunger and awe. Still, the monks aren't villains. Not really. They care for the sick. They copy books. They bury the dead. And sometimes, if you knock gently, they'll give you a stale heel of cheese or a ladle of thin soup. Charity, they call it. Mercy, maybe. It won't fill your belly, but it might help your soul. And on feast days, those rare holy days when restrictions are lifted and God allows indulgence, you might even get invited in. You sit at the back, of course, near the novices. Your bowl is smaller, your bread is older, and the fish is already picked over. But for one night, you sit at a table with people who eat with clean hands, and it feels like something better, like civilization, like a future. You don't speak, of course, but your eyes dart between plates. You take mental notes. They chew slowly. They close their eyes sometimes. They bless the food before and after, as if thanking God twice makes it last longer. You try it yourself that night, with your own bread, just a crust and a drop of broth. You whisper grace, and for once it feels like it mattered, until the pig outside starts squealing again, and you remember you still haven't built a new pen. Monks may be full of prayer and pottage, but you're just full of mud and deadlines. If meat is a miracle, and bread is survival, then vegetables are your secret weapon. Humble, persistent, dirt-covered salvation. They grow where nothing else will. They fill pots and bellies. They ask for rain and patience. And in return, they give you colour in a world that tastes mostly like grey. You don't call them vegetables, though. That word isn't quite in use yet. To you, they're just herbs. Everything green is a herb. Everything edible that doesn't run away or moo is a herb. Leeks herbs. Cabbage. Also a herb. Carrots. If it grew under the ground and didn't try to kill you, herb. Your garden is small, but it is yours. It sits behind your crook house, fenced poorly but fiercely protected. It's where your hands go when there's nothing else to give. It's where your hope grows. Literally. In spring you plant beans. Fat, waxy, reliable. Peas too. They don't ask much, just a stick to climb and a little sun. Cabbages are your pride, curling tight like fists made of leaves. And carrots, crooked, pale sweet, if you pull them early. You grow parsnips, garlic turnips and onions, each one a friend with a face and a purpose. You know their moods. You know when a potato's sulking or a leek is lying. You talk to them while you weed just softly enough that God can't accuse you of idolatry. In a world where animals die, bread moulds, and lords take everything your vegetables feel honest, earned. You even have a few exotics. The Easter cabbage, the apple-headed variety. Show-offs. The kind of greens that make people stop and compliment your soil. You nod politely but say nothing. It's bad luck to brag about produce. But not all vegetables are welcome. Cucumbers, for example, are dangerous. Not poisonous, not cursed, just French. And if there's one thing your village collectively agrees on, it's that the French are always inviting disease. They eat cucumbers, and the cucumbers give them fevers. That's the logic. No one has questioned it since the plague. A wise rule: if the French love it, don't eat it. That includes snails, poetry, and green salad. Yes, raw vegetables are strictly taboo. Lettuce might as well be poison ivy. You were taught from birth that anything uncooked is suspicious, sneaky, slippery, capable of sneaking plague straight into your bloodstream. One 1500s cookbook even opens with this chilling advice: beware of green salads and raw fruits, for they will make your master sick. Well, that's you, so you boil it all. Everything. Even apples sometimes. Fruit is sliced, softened, buried in pies or cooked into honey preserves. Quince is the star, a firm sour fruit that when cooked becomes something like marmalade and something like magic. It's also a meat seasoning if you have meat to season. You usually don't. Apples and pears grow wild. If you're lucky, you live near trees that drop their bounty into your waiting apron. But you don't just pick, you ask. Trees belong to someone. Often the Lord, sometimes the church. Even a pear on the wrong branch can turn into a whipping. So you forage quietly. Brambles offer berries, strawberries, raspberries, red currants. You learn to spot them in hedgerows and woods, scraping knees and staining fingers. Mushrooms appear overnight like fairy secrets, risky but rewarding. Wild garlic grows near streams. Nettles are prickly but nutritious. And if you find honey in the woods, you treat it like treasure, sticky, golden, bee-defended treasure. Even chestnuts have a season. In the hills of Italy and France, if you happen to be a peasant there, instead of here, chestnuts become bread. Roasted, ground, baked into survival. In your village, you've only seen them once. A passing monk had a sack. He said they were sacred. He also said you couldn't have any, but perhaps your greatest tool, your culinary wand, is the herb bundle. Rosemary, parsley, sage, thyme. If you've managed to grow or trade for these, your reputation improves instantly. Because even if your stew is mostly water and apology, a pinch of flavour makes it seem intentional. Like a meal. Like something someone meant to make. Rich people use spices. They have saffron, cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper. All imported. All expensive. You have dirt. But sometimes dirt is enough if the carrot's sweet and the onion's loyal. You chop, boil. Stir, repeat. The soup never stops. It evolves, shifts, consumes. Leftovers becomes new again. It's not just a dish, it's a process. A bubbling journal of your week. Monday's cabbage. Tuesday's beans. Wednesday's disappointment. Thursday's surprise turnip. By Friday, the pot is alive with memories, and you always eat together. One pot, many spoons. Everyone dips, slurps, spills. Your children fight over the last chunk of carrot like it's a gold coin. You let them. Carrots should be fought for. And yes, it's boring, monotonous. Soup again, stew again, boiled turnip until you lose your will to live. But every now and then, when the light catches the steam just right and the salt ratio is merciful, you take a bite that tastes warm. Not good, but warm. And warm is enough. You eat. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve. You stack the empty bowls and tell yourself that tomorrow you'll find a mushroom patch, maybe even a berry bush, maybe And maybe Marta will trade you some rosemary again. Your kitchen is not a room. It's not even really a corner. It's wherever the fire lives, wherever the smoke billows, thick enough to make your eyes sting, and your clothes smell like someone set a forest on fire and forgot to apologize. It's a place where heat is sacred, and your biggest fear aside from starvation is running out of dry wood. You don't have cabinets. You don't have drawers. You don't even have a table half the time. What you have is a hearth. A blackened pit of stone or earth in the middle of your home, surrounded by soot grease and vague prayers. If you're lucky, you've got a hook, one single rusty hook hanging over the fire. That's your entire culinary empire. You hang your cooking pot there, a cauldron heavy enough to be used in battle if someone ever invades your stew. Iron earthenware, whatever hasn't cracked from overuse. It's blackened, scorched, and beloved. You stir with a stick, or a wooden spoon if you haven't burned the last one by accident. Your fuel is wood, but not just any wood, dry wood, which is rarer than mercy in winter. Wet logs smoke instead of burn, and smoke makes your food taste like sorrow. You spend hours collecting branches, drying twigs, begging your neighbour for a stump's worth of heat. Sometimes, if you're truly desperate, you burn dried cow dung. Yes, that's a thing. And no, you don't talk about it. In theory, your house has a chimney. In practice, it's a hole in the roof with ambitions. Smoke curls around your face, clings to your hair, settles in your lungs. You cough like a poet, wheeze like a dying bard. But the fire keeps burning. That's what matters, because without fire there's no cooking, and without cooking you die. Raw food is not an option, not just because of superstition though. Yes, you still think salads are an invitation to the plague, but because your ingredients demand heat. Beans must soften, onions must melt, cabbage must be tamed, and the only way to do that is with bubbling, relentless, fire-fed boiling. Boiling is your art form. You boil everything. Vegetables, bones yesterday's bread, mysterious greens whose names you've forgotten but hope won't kill you. You boil until flavour appears, or at least until texture disappears. You don't fry. You don't grill. Roasting requires an open fire and meat worth sacrificing. Baking needs an oven, and ovens are for the rich or the religious. You once saw a communal bakehouse, though, a place where villagers brought their shaped dough to cook in a single giant oven. You waited 5 hours for a turn. Your loaf burned anyway. Your cookware is inherited, scarred, heavy. The pot you use was once your grandmother's, and it has outlived 3 husbands, 2 wolves, and a plague. You trust it more than your priest. You don't own knives, at least not good ones. You use what you have, a blade with more rust than edge, a chipped bowl passed off as rustic, and the ladle carved from wood slightly chewed on the end, possibly by a child, or a rat. No one's quite sure. Still you make do, because in this room, this smoky, creaking, soot-covered cathedral of desperation, meals happen. Real ones. Not feasts, not extravagance, but moments. You've stirred broth here on the night your son was born. You've burned porridge here the day your cow died. You've scraped the bottom of the pot with tears in your eyes and pride in your chest. And sometimes, just sometimes, you cook meat. When the pig is finally butchered, or a neighbour shares a rabbit, or Lent finally ends, and God allows joy, you hang meat from the rafter beams. Long, thin strips of pork, thick salted cuts of mutton. You smoke them slowly over low fire while whispering thanks under your breath. Smoke preserves. Smoke blesses. Smoke hides the fact that it's already halfway to rotting. You've learned to cut away mold, to ignore maggots, to cook twice, boil hard and add herbs until everything tastes like survival again. And even when there's no meat, no vegetable, no bread, when the pot is mostly water, and hope you still stir. You stir like it's a ritual, like your spoon can summon flavor, like movement means life. You tell stories while cooking. You let the kids add salt poorly. You teach them to smell boiling cabbage and guess how many days it's been stewing. You joke that your soup could solve wars if only because enemies would flee its smell. Sometimes you laugh when a potato explodes. You cry when the pot cracks. You sing over the fire badly, but earnestly. And even when the rain gets in through the roof and your wood won't catch, you sit by the hearth and pretend. Pretend the stew is coming. Pretend the smell of warmth and garlic is real. Pretend you're rich enough for pepper or enough meat to fill a pan. But mostly you're grateful for fire. Fire that warms, fire that cooks, fire that glows just enough to distract you from the dark. Because in a world where everything is hard land, bread, time, life, this flickering orange light is the only softness you own. You step outside and the world smells different. Smoke still clings to your clothes, of course. That'll never change. But now it's mixed with something else, frying, grease, boiling, fat meat you're not allowed to eat, and pies you're not allowed to afford. This is the medieval street. And this is dinner for people who don't have kitchens, don't have time, or don't have enough dignity left to care about what touches their food. You fall into that last category more often than you'd like. Street food isn't what it sounds like. It's not colourful stalls with witty signs and food truck charm. It's a guy with a cart, a greasy cloth, and a deeply questionable relationship with hygiene. He sells pies, or what he calls pies. You've seen one fall and bounce. Still, when your firewood is wet, or your stomach is louder than your pride, you consider him a saint. The meat inside the pie. Probably beef, possibly pork. Occasionally don't ask. You take a bite and chew quickly before your brain has time to panic. It's hot, greasy, and suspiciously chewy. But it fills you, and it's not soup. That alone feels like treason against your own kitchen. You once saw someone sell sausage on the street. It smelled incredible. Cost half a day's wages. You walk past slowly inhaling like a thief. You've been trying to recreate the smell ever since with boiled garlic and crushed beans. You've failed. Sometimes you find stews being ladled out of massive pots in alleyways. Community food, they call it. More often than not, it's yesterday's leftovers reheated with water, a root vegetable, and a prayer. Still, when it's cold and your children are crying, a bowl for a penny feels like a miracle. But the city isn't just full of vendors. It's full of temptation. Fishmongers shout their offerings in tones that could raise the dead. Fresh mackerel, fat eels, salted cod for saints and sinners. You don't know if they're poets or liars. Probably both. The fish glisten under flies laid out on wooden boards slick with seawater and something more concerning. You buy the cheapest. Always the cheapest. Herring. Or if you're feeling rich, a stubby little eel you'll later try to explain to your youngest as just like meat, only boneless and angry. Salted fish is more common. It lasts longer. Tastes worse. You dunk it in vinegar. You soak it in ale. You pray over it. None of it works. It still chews like a boot and smells like a fisherman's worst regret. But it feeds you. Barely. And in the background of every street is the butcher. Oh, the butcher. His stall is a mix of heaven and horror. He slaps slabs of beef onto blood-soaked boards. He waves cleavers like opera conductors. He's loud, jolly, and almost certainly a sociopath. You want to hate him, but you don't, because he feeds people. Real meat. The kind that doesn't come from a snare or a hope or an accident. You've never bought from him. You've stared. You've begged with your eyes. Once you found a scrap on the ground. You picked it up, wiped it, and ran. You told yourself it was dignity-free, not dignity lost. You tell yourself that a lot. In wealthier towns, food gets stranger, fancier. Bakers make white bread and wastel loaves so soft they collapse under their own wealth. Pastry shops sell tarts with fillings you can't pronounce. One time a traveller handed you a piece of fruit soaked in honey and wrapped in dough. You bit into it and saw stars. Your tongue still talks about it when you're asleep, but that's not your daily life. Your daily life is asking how long something has been sitting out, how much of the crust can be trimmed, whether the apple is rotting or just fermenting. You develop a sixth sense for food gone wrong. You sniff everything. You tap loaves to test for life. You shake eggs and listen for betrayal. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. And when money's too tight, even for the cheapest stew you beg, it's not noble. It's not poetic. It's cold fingers on colder knees asking someone who's also starving if they have just a little less self-respect than you do today. You get ignored. Sworn at. Once someone dropped a boiled onion into your lap. You wept. It was the nicest thing anyone had done for you all month. There are also scraps. Real ones. Thrown from windows, tossed from stalls left behind on empty crates. You learn to scan for them like a hawk. A half-eaten crust. A gnawed bone. A pie shell licked, but not destroyed. You don't steal. You scavenge. That's the difference. At least in your head. On festival days, things improve. People eat more, waste more. You linger near the church after Mass, hoping for bread from the Lord's table. Sometimes the priest hands out loaves to show God's mercy. Sometimes he hands out sermons. You pray for bread. And when all else fails, when there's no coin, no mercy, no scraps, you tighten your belt. Literally, a tighter belt suppresses hunger, not for long, but long enough. You sleep early. You dream of roast chicken. You wake to cold air and a stomach that thinks you hate it. But the street will be full again tomorrow. Someone will be selling something. Someone will drop something. Someone might remember your face and offer you the end of a meat pie or a cabbage leaf or even a kind word. And on that day you'll call it a feast. The market doesn't start with coins. It starts with eyes, a quick glance, a subtle nod. The unspoken dance of desperation and negotiation. Because in your world, money is rare. Coinage is reserved for taxes, debts, or disasters. Food, real food, is bought with something better, favours, promises, and lies. You wake before dawn, strap a basket to your back, and make your way toward the village green. It's not much of a market, more like a chaotic picnic for the half-starved. But here, trade happens. This is where you turn 6 eggs into a wheel of cheese, or a stale loaf into 3 onions and a rumour. Bartering isn't casual. It's war with politeness. Your best weapon, dairy. If your cow's still giving milk, you're temporarily wealthy. You churn butter, you skim cream, you ferment what's left into buttermilk or soft cheese. Then you show up with a grin and a clay pot wrapped in cloth and pretend your entire future isn't curdling inside it. Fresh from the churn you lie. Everyone lies. That man with the apples, he picked them a week ago. That woman with the smoked fish, half of it is just smell. But no one says anything. You all agree to pretend that freshness is an attitude, not a fact. You walk in with 3 small rounds of cheese shaped like squash dreams. You leave with 2 carrots, a cabbage, and something that might be a turnip, but could also be a very rude root, pretending to be food. You don't ask. Sometimes the trades get weirder. Your neighbour wants you to help mend a roof. In exchange, he offers you bacon grease in a jar. Not bacon, just the grease. But it's rich, salty, and will turn your next pot of soup into something nearly edible. You climb the roof. Another time, Marta offers you a boiled chicken foot one with 3 toenails still attached. In return, she wants your husband's help digging a new latrine trench. You accept, begrudgingly. That foot becomes the highlight of your week. Even gossip becomes currency. You know who has beets growing unusually fast. You know who's been sneaking into the monastery gardens. You know which family might be hoarding salt. You keep that knowledge close until you need a favour. Then suddenly you remember that the miller's wife has been fermenting pears behind the woodshed. Information buys food, but the most powerful trades happen in fall. When the harvest comes in, that brief window of plenty before winter clamps its icy jaw. You dry herbs, you hang onions, you smoke meat, you salt fish. Your home smells like survival, and smoke always smoke. You preserve everything, every root, every leaf, every unfortunate mushroom, you're 60% sure isn't poisonous. Apples are sliced and sun-dried on cloths by the fire. Beans are strung like necklaces and hung from beams. Garlic is braided. Cabbage is buried in barrels to ferment until it smells like someone pickled regret. If you do it right, your pantry sings with options. If you do it wrong, your children eat mold in January and you pretend not to notice. Salt is your truest ally. It pulls water from meat, dries it into jerky, and buys you weeks of preservation. But salt isn't free. It's mind-carried, taxed and hoarded. You once traded a pair of woolen socks and a story for a pouch of it. Best trade you ever made. Then there's ale. You brew it in batches, let it ferment in a corner of your hut where the rats have agreed to peace terms. A weak ale flavoured with whatever herbs survived the summer. You bottle it in reused flasks, cork it with rags, and offer it to anyone who looks thirsty and wealthy. 1 bottle might get you a pie. 2 bottles. A visit from someone who wants to marry your daughter. You don't always say yes. Occasionally you host a meal of sorts. You gather scraps, bones, boiled turnips, leftover cabbage. You throw it all in the pot. You add herbs with ceremony. Then you invite the neighbours, only the useful ones. They bring bread, a single egg, an old heel of cheese. It's not charity, it's politics with bowls. And afterward, everyone leaves just a little less hungry. More importantly, they owe you. Debt is the only thing richer than flour. Of course, not all debts are paid in food. Sometimes they're paid in labour or secrets or silence. Your neighbour's goat might have wandered onto your land and nibbled your last carrot crop. But you didn't say anything. Because last winter they gave you 2 jars of pickled turnips when your husband had fever. You hold on to that memory, like food, like vengeance, because you'll need both. Sometimes it works the other way. You get sick. Your hands can't knead dough. Your children are too young to trade. The frost comes early, or the rats get bold. That's when Marta shows up with boiled roots and pretends it's because she made too much. You don't cry, but your hands shake when you take the bowl. In these moments, you realize food is never just food. It's leverage. It's forgiveness. It's community. It's a form of storytelling. Who grew this? Who stole it? Who shared it? Who owes for it? Each bite has a history. Each meal is an act of survival and politics. You don't just eat to live. You trade to eat and live to keep trading. Because next winter is already peeking over the horizon. And the goat next door still looks guilty. Word count 100. Next, we'll explore the final battlefield of food feast days, forbidden flavours, and what happens when religion meets hunger in a very inconvenient calendar. There's a joke in your village. Feast days are when the church says you're allowed to pretend you're not poor. You laugh when you hear it. Not because it's funny, but because it's the kind of joke that tastes bitter, like over-fermented beer, or a turnip boiled one day too long. It's true. And truth in your world often wears the mask of comedy. Because here's the holy irony. Feast days don't always mean feasting. They mean fasting is over. They mean the rules temporarily lift. They mean that if you happen to have food, real food, you're allowed to eat it again. But most of the time you don't. So you celebrate not with a banquet, but with not being punished for wanting one. Easter, Christmas, the feast of Saint So-and-so. Each one carries with it a vague promise of indulgence, a whisper from the heavens that yes, you may be human again, at least for the afternoon. And so the village prepares, not with trumpets or dancers, but with boiling pots and sharper knives. Bread is baked extra loaves, even the white kind, if someone's saved enough wheat. Butter is churned eggs, collected pies assembled with whatever meat managed to survive both the winter and your neighbour's wandering goat. The smell alone is worth celebrating. It spreads through the village like a rumour, warm, spiced, slightly singed. Children follow it with wide eyes and twitching noses. Adults pretend they're not excited, but their hands move faster when chopping herbs. Marta brings out her best pot. You wear your least holy apron. Someone even sweeps the dirt floor. The church naturally leads the charge. The priest blesses the bread. He blesses the table. He blesses the people who provided the bread and the table. He does not bless the woman who brought a pie with no filling. That's your job. After Mass, the feasting begins. There's meat, small portions quickly grabbed. There's stew, thicker than usual. There's honeyed bread, dried fruit cheese, with barely any mould. There's ale. Of course there's ale. Darker, richer, more forgiving than the weak stuff you usually brew. The children eat too fast. The old ones eat too slow. Someone sings, badly. You join in anyway, and for a moment, just a small, flickering, fragile moment, it feels like something approaching joy. You eat without counting the bites. You drink without measuring the cup. You laugh without guilt, and then the day ends. Because feast days are rare, and joy is rationed. The next morning you wake to crumbs and silence. The pot is empty. The ale is gone. The priest is already reminding you of the next fast. Because if there's one thing the church loves more than feasting, it's discipline. The calendar is a maze of forbidden flavors. Mondays might be safe. Wednesdays fasting. Fridays definitely fasting. Saturdays depends on the season, the saint, and whether the moon is being particularly judgmental. Then there's Lent. Again, you blink and it's back. 46 days of culinary purgatory. You try to explain it to your youngest child. Why there's no meat. Why milk is unclean. Why the egg you saved from last week must be hidden like a sin. He doesn't understand. He asks if God hates cheese. You say no. But the way the church talks, sometimes you wonder. Even feast days have rules. Certain foods are clean, others are luxurious. Some priests argue fish is meat. Others insist swan is fine if it's served on a Tuesday after Mass. No one agrees, but everyone judges. So you become creative. You invent meals that technically obey the rules. A barley gruel with cheese essence. A meatless pie filled with herbs, and the memory of bacon. A turnip roasted long enough to taste like not a turnip. Your kitchen becomes a laboratory of religious compliance and quiet rebellion. You learn to bend the lines. You boil fish heads with onions and call it broth. You fry stale bread in old bacon grease and call it crusty delight. You mash beans with garlic and pretend it's pate. If God has a problem, he's welcome to send a lightning bolt and a proper recipe. But mostly you obey, because disobedience is risky. The church watches. The neighbours gossip. Your soul, they say, is always half an inch away from damnation and possibly indigestion. You wonder sometimes what Jesus would say if he saw the way his name is used to dictate your dinner. Would he nod solemnly at your lentil stew? Would he smite you for your contraband egg? Would he bless your pie crust? More importantly, would he help you clean the pot? Because that pot, your loyal blackened cauldron, is now your altar. You stir with reverence. You season with superstition. You serve with gratitude even when the bowl is half empty. You don't feast often, but when you do, you remember it. The taste of butter, the feel of warm bread, the sound of laughter around a shared pot. These things matter, not because they're frequent, but because they're not. Feast days are like stars, distant, rare, and only visible when the smoke clears. And until the next one, you carry the memory like a secret, hidden deep, next to the last slice of salted pork. The pot is cold now. The fire has faded into a gentle glow, low and orange, barely enough to keep the shadows at bay. You sit back against the rough wall of your home, the air heavy with the fading scent of herbs and wood smoke. Your belly is not full, not truly, but it is not empty either. And in the world you inhabit, that counts as a blessing. You listen to the quiet creak of the roof, the faint snoring of your youngest, and the distant bark of a dog that might belong to no one. The rats are asleep, the wolves are watching, but for now, for tonight, everything holds still. You think of all the meals you've cooked, thin stews, burnt crusts, boiled things without names. Of all the trades you've made, the secrets you've kept, the favours you've owed and cashed in. Food wasn't just about eating, it was everything. It decided who lived, who starved, who prayed harder, and who buried the others first. And in some quiet way it taught you love, not the soft, poetic love of songs and courtly tales, but the real kind. The kind baked into hard bread and served without apology. The kind stirred into a pot that wasn't meant to stretch, but always did. The kind that looks like scraping your own bowl so someone else can eat a little more. Now as the night deepens and the fire dies, you lie down beside your family. The straw pokes your side. The air is cold. but your hands are still warm from the pot. Your breath slows. Your mind drifts not to kings or saints or nobles feasting on swans, but to the slow simmer of cabbage and thyme, to the crackle of crust, to the spoon resting beside the fire. And in that stillness, you finally sleep,